That you're fine.
We are live.
We are live. This is Senate Finance. And this is February 21st. And today we had the bees in a couple weeks ago when we first started and didn't know much. And so this Friday, since we covered on Tuesday what we were going to cover this Friday, we did it in our joint session with Ways and Means. Thought we'd give the school superintendents and business managers a chance to come in and give us feedback, at least on what they're hearing or know or think they know. There's an awful lot of information. I will say this committee went home with spreadsheet overload last night. Nothing like spreadsheets that don't do things by your counting. So we were running up and down in them, but more and more information is coming out. I emailed to the committee today, apparently a bill dropped this morning after our meeting at 8 o'clock in House Ed, which is the administration's first take at a bill. And so I've sent that out to you. I will post it when it's probably posted on House Ed. I don't want to post it till we have testimony on it, but I sent it to you to read. Okay, so.
This just keeps happening to me. I'm sorry.
Your chair break again?
We need to go to the seminars.
We've got to repair message in.
It happens just when you don't expect it.
Can we go steal a chair somewhere?
No, I'll be okay. I'm gonna just like sit up high and feel like a little kid. I can't touch the ground
You
except
feel
with my
sick,
toes.
Yeah.
Come on a Tuesday and switch with your seat with Senator Montez.
Yeah, no.
If you have a senator you particularly don't like, you could secretly switch chairs. All right. It is Friday, so things get a little crazy around here, but we're gonna start with Chelsea Myers. Chelsea, you're here. Come on up. We just asked you to introduce yourself for the record. And I think before anyone starts, the things we have learned is that any numbers that are being put out there are numbers that they think would be in effect in 2028 after all the other proposed consolidations has happened. They do not propose to be overlaid on today's system, which I know makes it really difficult for you because everybody's trying to understand what's going on today, and they're talking about numbers that should be going on if and when we go where they are proposing we go. So that's really helpful.
For the record, Chelsea Meyer, Executive Director of the Vermont Superintendents Association. That's a shift.
Yes.
As I understand it, from what the original proposal was, which would be funding next FY 27 originally was the timeline, or that funding was first before governance in the original timeline. So it's shifted since then.
A lot of things are shifting as we go.
I don't think it changes anything.
And the House Ed Committee, which is the first legislative committee, just got the bill this morning. The bill is 138 pages and hadn't been through the editing process. So what they've got, and I haven't had a chance to open mine, may be the 8-page short bill form, which is just the basic, this is what we're going to put in this space form. So we are all dealing with not having anything hard in writing that you can start marking up. And we do not have a transition plan as yet as to how we're gonna get from here to there. I think there's a fair likelihood that there will be a change in the funding formula to more of a foundation formula. I think there's momentum for that. No numbers are attached to that at this point. We're all working the House. They did a lot of work last year on trying to do a foundation formula. In the end, they could not get all the data they needed to put a final plan together, but they have picked up from there this year. So I think we will get a foundation proposal from them at the revenue bill, so it will start there. But that's about all we know. We are working. We've been looking at proposals for governance, been trying to understand that, because eventually this committee will have to put in numbers and have to put in numbers for any kind of transition that's going to happen. And we really can't do any of that until we number, if they're going to change districts at all, that there's a decision made by at least one committee on what will start in the legislature as a proposal. I think our fiscal office is using the next to last map up there behind you. It is the School Boards Association division map. Somewhat smaller than the governor's proposal, but definitely larger than the two maps on this side, which is what we have now. I guess the farthest one is counted, right?
On the left,
Yeah,
those are the tech center districts.
tech center districts. And then the other one is the present situation.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see something between the present situation, and we don't even have the 5 district map.
Actually, we do, it's way over on the right.
Way over.
It's hidden under the TV. It's fine. With it.
We know that not well.
Yes. I mean, if we're told, but none of us have gotten the numbers enough to be able to figure out that those size districts are necessary to achieve the savings and vision. I'm looking at Senator Brock, or I'll look at Senator Beck, but that's what we've been told. We need to be able to sit down with the numbers we got yesterday, and then we can give our joint fiscal office a chance to crunch the numbers to see what would happen to them if we went smaller.
Do you have written testimony?
I haven't submitted it because I was still working on it, but I will
Okay.
after. I want to use as little of the time as possible on my testimony and turn it over to superintendents who have really dug into it. But I did want to share a couple of remarks, and we are using the information that's most available to us as of last night. Or what we thought was last night, and to the extent possible, I've asked superintendents to consider impact on a school basis because of the uncertainty about governance. And so they've done the best that they can, and it's framed in that way, but there are some uncertainties. So I just want to caveat that. So thank you again for letting me speak. When I received the invitation, I asked the Vermont Superintendents Association's leadership team, including our board of trustees and regional group presidents, to share their questions and concerns about the proposal in a shared document. The prompt went out Wednesday evening, and by mid-morning the next day, they had generated over 5 pages of questions. It only grew after that. I have included an organized and very condensed version of that at the end of my testimony, which I will submit to you. But I would like to share a couple of them now. What is the clear vision for the future of public education included in this plan, and how do the changes presented move us toward that vision? Where exactly are the cost savings? How are they being projected? And what is the evidence behind these estimates? Large staffing cuts do seem central to this plan. How will this impact our economy, our future education workforce, and the well-being of the families and communities that experience job loss? Moving to the assumptions of the EB model would take significant investments in infrastructure, transportation, and transition costs. How are these investments accounted for in the proposal? How does the plan to address debt service and other existing financial obligations like service contracts and building leases in the districts? Why is the proposal for 5 districts when the model by all other accounts is based on a district size of 3,900 students? What evidence is there to support 5 districts in terms of both quality and efficiency? Will the laws that currently exist for Vermont's education system be repealed if they are not appropriately accounted for in the staffing models? How will the state AOE support districts during the transition to manage legal, logistical, and operational challenges? How will the proposal have an impact on rural areas, including school and class sizes, transportation, and access to educational opportunities? If an independent choice school's tuition is significantly higher than the base amount plus weights, how will that be managed? What equity concerns emerge if the full tuition is required for a student to attend that school and the difference must be made up by the student's family? How will the foundation formula ensure adequate funding through economic and political pressures? And how does the allowance of raising additional funds align with FERC decisions? So again, we have a couple more pages of those. Happy to submit them.
No, that having those submitted
Sure.
adds to our question. Our question yesterday was, where will the savings be realized? Senator Brock said that everything, and I'm looking for the chart from yesterday, they are going to add teachers, they're going to add, there were all kinds of adds, no subtractions. The one thing that was not in their base funding, and it's the base, which is the 13.2, plus the weights, which is what you will get, plus and they're taking in 100% of transportation costs, which was new yesterday, and special ed. And we haven't heard there's any changes to special ed. But they still can't. But the one thing that wasn't accounted for were paraeducators. And I did ask about that. The proposal would allow schools, and as far as we can see, it will be the districts. So the big districts will be allowed to raise money. There may be a cap as to how much, and there will be, it's called state guarantee. But in some way, the grand list will be equalized so that the lower income poor districts can raise same amount of money on the same footing. And that's, if you choose to put paras in, that's where they will be done. They are basing all of their proposals on, there's the PICUS, it's not a report, he does adequacy and funding of, everyone knows Larry Picus, and their folks, as to all the national standards, as to what numbers of teachers per student, numbers of, support staff for students. Everything sounds like everybody's getting more. The hope is that by going to larger classes, that schools will be able, they talk about reinvesting the savings, provide more, especially in the higher grades, more class options. That's the theory that we're working under. the hard numbers we haven't found yet, except there was a sample budget done a week ago by Nate Levinson. I'm assuming you saw that. Working with their base of numbers. School budgeting is above my math skills and pay grade.
Luckily, we have 3 superintendents.
Yes.
And some business managers, and I know they have really looked at the numbers.
Yes,
and
so
looked
I
at
think
that.
that's what we need to
Great.
hear.
I would love to hear
Those
from them.
numbers work. And that was last Friday for anyone that wants to bring it up on the website.
So I'll share a couple of just anecdotes that I received, if that's
Okay.
okay with you, and
That
then
is
we'll
great.
move to the deeper dives from the superintendents. So I reached out to another group of superintendents to assess the impact of the proposed funding changes on their schools. Again, we tried to do it school-based, not district-based. It was not as clear cut as that, but we did a try. They use the information available to the best of their ability. The full impact of this proposal is yet to be understood. Here's a couple of the examples. Superintendent Amy Rex of Milton School District, who will share more with you in a few minutes, shared this. The shortfall is close to $7 million. Even if we eliminated all expenses associated with the district office, every position, the business office, costs associated with the board and legal services, curriculum, assessment, and tech services, the shortfall would still be $3 million for Milton schools, approximately 45 positions. The superintendent of St. Johnsbury School District had this to say about the impact. After removing all of our high school choice tuition students and their associated weightings, our single public pre-K through 8 elementary school, which serves over 650 students, would face a devastating reduction resulting in a 3.8 million funding loss. Additionally, if the proposed model's categorical aid is supposed to replace the current Act 173 block grant, then our district would see its $2,350 per student amount drop to only $840. This would create a 5.4 million shortfall for St. Johnsbury. This shift would force severe reductions in my elementary school and for special education services. But of course, we know that special education services are non-negotiable.
Yes.
Or require our local taxpayers to cover the gap, further straining a community that already faces financial challenges. And then the superintendent of Winooski School District expressed deep concern and fear for the Winooski community regarding this proposal, calling it detrimental to the entire system. He emphasized that the proposed funding cuts would not only reduce essential services, but would fundamentally dismantle the system designed to support Winooski's community. Critical resources such as multilingual liaisons, wraparound services, and many other vital programs would no longer have funding. Though he couldn't be here today, I think his testimony is very vital to hear given the unique population. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I will end with this. It is very clear that there is change that is needed. There are significant inequities in the current funding system in the state. I urge you to take a thoughtful approach. Any changes to the funding system must be paired with changes to the delivery system. Don't force the public school system to do the same with less. Our students deserve better. And I'll pass it over to Amy, who I think has a timeline.
Okay, so Amy, welcome. Just
Thank
you know,
you.
yourself, the record, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Amy Rex, Superintendent of the Milton Town School District. I thank you for welcoming me today and taking consideration of my testimony. I have served in Vermont schools since 1993. I was a teacher in Lamoille North Supervisory Union, principal at the Danville K through 12 school, principal at Harwood Union Middle and High School, and for the last 7 years, I've been superintendent of the Milton Town School District. I think my experience has informed my understanding of Vermont's diverse educational landscape and the unique local cultures that we're so lucky to have here in our state. I also believe that in education, there is always room for growth and improvement. And any transformational approaches to Vermont education must include the education funding model, governance, and the delivery model. The plan must not only be well thought out, it must be informed by the expertise of those of us in the field and the experiences of the children and families that we serve. To provide a little context of the Milton Town School District, over the last 6 years, our budget has failed 4 of those 6 times on the first vote and has needed 1 to 2 additional votes in order for the budget to pass. Every time the budget failed, we would have to make reductions. Year over year, we've been shaving program expenses ranging from field trips, supplies, books, technology, educational software, and transportation, non-special education support staff, and administrators. We have 3 schools in our district. We serve pre-K, elementary, and middle school, which operate all in one building. And then we have our high school, which is on a separate campus just a mile away. Currently, our enrollment is 165 pre-K students, 470 students in grades kindergarten through 4th grade, 420 students in grades 5 through 8, and 427 students in grades 9 through 12. We have a poverty rate of 43.4%, which is an increase of 10% year over year from 2019, when it was around 33%. 21% of our students are on individual education plans, and that's higher than the state average. The number of students with autism and low incidence disabilities, which require a great number of services, has been increasing year over year. Our high school graduation rate is almost 10% higher than the state average. And our math and literacy proficiency scores linger below the state average in the lower grades. And then by 9th grade, they're at or above the state average. And that I believe is a result of our collective effort year over year and the support services that we're able to continually put in place for students at every grade level to provide them what they need. Our class sizes are just below the optimum range, and the optimum range for kindergarten through grade 3 is 18. Our average is 16. Optimum at grade 4 is 22. Our average is at 18. Grades 5 and 6, the optimum is 22. That average right now is at 19. And grades 7 and 8, the optimum is 22. Their class average right now is 18. And at the high school, the optimum also is at 22, and they are at 17 in grade 9, 18 in grade 10. Electives are a little bit lower. They're at 14. And we have adequate space, except for in our middle school. They're starving for space. Several classrooms have been divided in half, and that does not allow any increase in class size. If you have 18 students, we could not squeeze any more into those half-size classrooms. But the rest of our classrooms are of good size and could serve up to 25 students comfortably. So given that my schools are in sort of range of the evidence-based model class size, and based on the details of the funding plan that was released yesterday, we did a little bit of a modeling exercise, and this is based on our FY26 proposed budget factors. So we have a long-term weighted average daily membership of 2,417.47 students. Our proposed budget is $39,291,625,000. And our education spending is anticipated to be at $33,266,953. And so if we were to receive the proposed base of the 13,200 plus the adjustments in FY26, we would receive approximately $25,641,000 instead of the $33,266,953, which is roughly a difference of $7.6 million. But for us to fully understand the impact, we decided that we wanted to take central services completely out of our budget. So as Chelsea said, that included all the staff associated with district office, the business office, technology services, all the expenses related to legal services, curriculum, professional development, assessments, and technology. And so that reduced us another 3.5 million. And of course, special ed's not included in this, and neither is transportation. So with a $3 million shortfall, I began to think about what that would look like in terms of reductions in programming and staff. And knowing that it's, the last hired is the first fired, we would have to reduce approximately 45 people to meet that shortfall. I first began addressing the class size. So if I was to reduce teachers so that we were at the maximum or just above the maximum in class size, that would be a total of 12 teachers across all 3 schools. And that doesn't get us very close to that 45 number. So I then went to reducing all of our academic interventionists for literacy and math, our instructional coaches, our hazing, harassment, and bullying coordinator, our school-wide behavior support. I reduced a school counselor in each school by 1. That gave me another 17 positions. And so I only had 16 more to go. And so I eliminated the world language program. That was a total of 6 teachers across the two buildings, middle and high school. The middle school health teacher, our middle school program for supporting students at risk. That's 4 staff members, and our staff members that are responsible for our regulation spaces in the elementary school. That was 2. And then 3 more to go. I just randomly chose unified arts, music, art type teachers. And when thinking about the EB model, a couple more points. It does not take into consideration any state required structures for behavior. And in Vermont, we have a very high bar. There's expectations that schools have regulation spaces, that we're using restorative practices. We're doing non-exclusionary discipline. We're conducting behavior threat assessments, and we have teams in place for that and training and many other types of safety practices. The model also does not take into account for staff that are necessary for the compliance of hazing, bullying, harassment, and Title IX. And it does not take into account any non-special education programs that support reducing outplacement and supporting students at risk. Their model also assumes that teachers will have a 45 to 50-minute block of planning per day. I can tell you that the teachers in my district, by their contract, have, and this is teachers in elementary, middle, and high school, have 80 minutes per day. And the plan continually does not address how teacher contracts will be reconciled. It's not just about money. There are considerable differences in contracts regarding the workday, planning time, meeting expectations. And I think that's an important factor that needs to be addressed. And I think I've heard this already, is that the plan also claims to expand early childhood, increase summer and after-school programming, provide additional mental health services, extend college and career pathways, and raise teacher salaries. Perhaps that's true. However, until I think we create a model based on the actual of Vermont and which districts and schools are going to consolidate, how many students will be in those schools, will those schools be close enough in proximity to share resources? And, I just think leaning on the model of an imaginary district of 12,000, I looked at Nate's presentation and his suggested numbers, I don't think it's going to yield the results that it claims to provide. And I believe that transformation is necessary. I believe it's very messy work. And I also believe that it should not be an experiment that adversely impacts our children. I think it should be well thought out and developed in partnership with the expertise in the field and with our families and children's experiences in mind. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I think you're right. This is very messy. And we've been giving a master plan based on national standards. We are going to be struggling over the next couple of weeks to try and put a Vermont base on these standards, to also reach a place where you don't have to worry about your budget going down every year, not to the rate in the, yeah, and those of us who are in health and welfare half the day also know that we need to get our healthcare costs under control, because they're a major driver in your personnel costs. So any thoughts, if the superintendents, business managers, if you could put your heads together and help us figure out what that Vermont version might look like. I think there's an understanding that we probably do need to go larger. We can't afford schools with a couple dozen kids in them. We can't afford to have teachers teaching classes with less than 10 kids or less than 5 kids in some cases. And because of our small size, we also can't afford to give students the range of classes that in some schools, so that they can even be able to accept a green and gold scholarship, if they happen to be class valedictorian, without taking classes outside of school, online or, privately. And so we need to move that education up. We do need to do some compacting of our delivery system. We've heard a lot about, if any one of you reduces your budget this year, but everybody else doesn't, then your taxes are going to go up anyway. So why bother reducing your taxes? Your spending. And at the same time, we've got a significant number of homeowners and apartment dwellers who just can't afford that upward pressure in that tax base. So we would love to have some, thought process from you as a group, you as superintendents, because we are going to have a decision before we go home this year. They're saying the end of May, we will have to reach some kind of an agreement by the end of June, because if the governor doesn't sign the budget, then the entire state shuts down, and that's usually the hammer that's held over us. But any input, if any kind of alternative thinking that you could give us would be helpful, not necessarily now. Senator Harding.
Yeah, I was just hoping we could hear from all the superintendents. I know some of them are on time crunches because
We're going to hear from everyone.
okay.
And if anyone is on a time crunch, let me know. Anytime. Okay.
I just have a real quick.
Yeah, quick question.
Hey, Amy, thanks for coming in today.
That's-
Just a real quick question. I think it might be way too early in the ball game for it, but I'm just curious if you and the team put together any projections for like tax rates. And I know the state guarantee part might be a little up in the air, so you might not be able to get that overage for what to get us back to our original budget of that 33 million. So I'm curious, and you can say it's way too early for you to know if there's any tax rates that you put together based on the new model.
No, we did not.
Probably too early, I would say.
Yeah. We can't do that. We have joint fiscal. Yep,
My guess, it would be 181 million out of a $2.4 billion budget is across the board, the way this current is contemplated, it'd be at a 7.5% decrease in taxes. But I doubt that's how it's going to ultimately land, because this is using a sledgehammer when we need to use a scalpel across a lot of different things.
but they're also talking about reinvest.
7.5%.
So if you're gonna reinvest, that's gonna eat into any increase.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the plan doesn't include all the currents.
We're gonna, you can tell we don't know a whole lot more than you do. We're gonna go on to Michael's, that's why they're, Michael Kawada.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. I do have written testimony, and I will review this in short because I'd like to have more discussion.
Okay.
But I will also send in the testimony, but I can pass out what I have, which I got in more detail. My name is Mike Licklider. I currently serve as the superintendent of Harwood Unified Union School District in Washington County. And I've been in education 34 years as a teacher, principal, and school administrator in 2 states now. Part of my experience includes 13 years as a superintendent in a school district of 5,400 students. So I understand a little bit about the scale that's being discussed today. And I do want to say that taking a look at the modeling for our 6 towns, it's very similar to what my colleague Amy Rex shared for her district. We would lose approximately $6.3 million in funding. And without adequate consideration of school scale, those reductions would be seriously difficult for a new hypothetical Winooski Valley School Board. I was particularly interested in some of the questions that Senator Hardy asked yesterday of the consultants regarding the modeling and the fact that current debt is not considered in the plan, nor is capital schools construction. I think that's, for my schools, that's a considerable consideration that must be taken into mind. Chelsea addressed some of the questions in her testimony related to how school facilities, construction costs, and capital expenses would be handled during the consolidation process. And I think my main concern is even moving to this new model in 2028, there's a lot of work that would need to be accomplished statewide, let alone within my own school district. By way of background, when I was hired in 2022, I had a lot of experience, which is why the board was interested in me in school construction. During my prior superintendency, I oversaw the renovation of 4 elementary schools ranging in size from 350 students to 650 students, the construction of a new elementary school with enrollment capacity of about 750 students. Then finally, a new high school, 390,000 square feet with a potential enrollment of 2,100 students. So this is an area that I really enjoy talking about and discussing. But because of the last few years and some of the concerns with the cuts that our school has already gone through, we've reduced between this current year and the proposed budget about 50 positions already. If we moved to this new model and the board had to reduce expenses in our schools by another $6 million, you're probably looking at, again, the same range of what Amy mentioned of anywhere from 30 positions, with eliminating everyone's position in district office to 60 positions if there is some related costs that would go to this new school district. So our board undertook a study starting in the fall of reconfiguration options. Now, just again, a little more background on Harwood. Immediately prior to my hiring, the board looked to consolidate both middle schools. and proposed a bond for consolidation of the two middle schools and the renovations of Harwood. And that bond was soundly rejected by the voters. I think partly due to the costs associated with the construction, but also due to the consolidation of two schools.
You have Crosset Brook and Duxbury,
Correct.
which is 5 miles, and you have middle school at Harwood,
Correct.
and Duxbury is 6, 7 miles up Route 100A.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons the board,
Yeah,
and I believe from conversations I had when I came in, the communities in the Mad River Valley were the ones most concerned. It was only 5 miles, but when you're coming from the reaches of Warren, that South Duxbury is already a considerable travel distance. So I'm not passing judgment either way, just saying that were the facts that we saw at the time. Now, again, looking forward now, our elementary schools in the valley, 4 elementary schools range in size from approximately 120 to 180. So as part of the study, our board is looking at, and I have a version 2 draft. The committee met with our architects 2 weeks ago, and we have some numbers to finalize, but our buildings range from 120 to 180. In order to realize savings, which is a very real possibility, and that's a piece of this model that I completely believe is accurate. We would spend in the neighborhood of $40 to $80 million in construction to be able to consolidate. There's not sufficient capacity in any one building without construction. So along with that, I think from our analysis that we've done so far with our board committee, our architects, I think you could say that, of the 13 configuration options that have been explored, everything on the table, the analysis indicates there's a direct and proportional relationship to the cost of construction and the potential long-term savings. In order to get to that point, there has to be construction in our schools, and I assume many other schools throughout the state. And that's absent looking at the administration's consideration of a larger regional high schools. So I think that's a serious consideration, that in order to move to this new funding model with a 13-2 base, we do need to look in many of our communities at those construction pieces. It takes time. The planning of the high school that I constructed, again, capacity of 2,100 students, from first community meetings for the bond to end of construction, which occurred during my last summer in that school district, took 4 years. So I think there's a lot of work, and that's a piece that I would encourage the finance committee to really do a deep dive before doing any kind of commitment to a funding model as proposed by the administration based on the PICUS analysis.
now we have had the state treasurer in to talk to us about bonding. One of our members was on 2 of the school construction needs and feasibility study. I think we recognize that probably in a large number of districts, no matter what size we decide on, that we will have to do construction. Senator Barkwood, it's also in Burlington, and that's been on the school board, and it's very familiar with how long it takes to build a high school. I think she's saying 6 years, and they aren't open yet. And they fortunately had someplace to go.
And another consideration along with that I would just point out, and I came from a larger metropolitan area. When we did our high school project, we had 2 general contractors who had the capacity to bid on that. During the bidding process, we lost one of those contractors because they took another job at a similar size project. So in the state of Vermont, construction is going to be, capacity for construction is going to be something that's a consideration as well.
It was suggested by the treasurer's office that we look at repeating bills, partial private partnerships, and that we would probably have to contract for 3 to 5 school construction projects to make it kind of worthwhile for a large construction firm to bid. And we know that's not going to happen quickly because we'd have to get 3 districts to agree to bond. The proposal is that the state would then provide money to help pay for that bond. But we haven't heard any commitment as to how or when we would do that. I also haven't heard any, if that would be acceptable to the gurus on Wall Street. Because they worried very much if we didn't kick in that you might not pay your loan next year. So we have to keep them happy. So we have a long way to go on.
That's a question. So I had a question about construction, but also staffing, for both you and Amy. You both talked about the number of staff that you would have to reduce in order to fit the proposed budget into your current scenario. And, you know, one of the things that the secretary has said was, oh, well, that's mostly just vacancy savings. And that across the state, there are enough vacant positions that there wouldn't be major layoffs. And it's just about managing the staff to the vacancies and that, but it sounds to me that first of all, I think managing vacancy savings across the state is really difficult if you're looking at like the massive districts, because people are literally living hundreds of miles apart from where there might be a vacancy. But it sounds to me like even if you're both taking into consideration laying off or getting rid of positions in your central offices, you would also have to reduce positions in frontline. And I guess my basic question is there any possibility of doing that even partly with vacancy savings or, you know, that kind of thing, or moving people off of the, you know, provisional licenses and all that, or is that just not feasible?
I know Amy has to go, so I have an answer for you, but
Yeah.
Amy, do you want to go first?
I can give you a real quick answer. You know, being in Chittenden County, vacancies aren't not nearly an issue for us as they are, say, in the Northeast Kingdom or more isolated spaces. You know, support staff, cafeteria workers, custodians, those are and you know, our intensive need programming specialists are the hardest positions to fill, but certainly not teachers. We don't have a concern there.
And in our budget, Harwood budget, we do have a vacancy factor. And what I will also tell you, our budget failed 3 times last year, and we're going into a very lean year where that is only an increase of 2% of ed spending. As part of the work that our finance director did, she significantly reduced that vacancy factor as part of our budget. So there's just not much in our line item that takes that into account, because we wanted to maximize reduction, or we wanted to minimize reduction for our current staff and maximize the budget lines that we have in place. So I can't speak statewide, but I can tell you that the answer from the secretary would not be true in my district.
Mm-hmm. And even looking between districts, I mean, that was the thing that was hard for me to imagine, is how do you manage vacancy savings across the broad swaths of geographic regions. Doesn't sound like it would be like swapping people from Chittenden County with, you know, Windsor County or Lamoille or whatever. The other question is sort of, the chair started to mention this, is did you see the testimony that we got from the bond bank about construction?
I have not.
Okay, I definitely would suggest, I know that all of you superintendents are spending lots of your time watching us on YouTube, and for that, I feel really bad for you.
We can expect a hardship pay.
I know.
Next year.
My superintendents are like, oh, it's an extra 20 hours a week of our time. We're watching everything, which I'm I'm sorry, but I also understand why you're doing it. But I would definitely recommend, especially because you have all that experience with construction, and I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the things that the head of bond bank, Michael Gahn, said, and some of his suggestions. And then reading the report, if you haven't already, about the construction, school construction, I'm sure you have. But one of the things the chair mentioned was this concept of, what is it? P3 construction, public-private partnerships, that essentially allow you to bring in private money by bidding out multiple projects at the same time, and doing more, for lack of a better term, kind of cookie cutter buildings, and that you say, okay, Harwood needs one, and Milton needs one, and Middlebury needs one, and Brattleboro needs one, and they'll just all go in together and get basically the same building, but just plopped at different places. I don't know if that's something you've ever had experience with, or if you think that might be feasible in Vermont.
My colleague in my neighboring district used that model for elementary schools. So they when they had to renovate a building, rather than renovating, they did new construction, and they used the same model in 5 locations. So that is something that they do see some marginal cost savings, because you're eliminating the costs associated with the design development phase.
Right. So you think it could be feasible, but it would be on a larger scale across the state.
I think it could be feasible. It depends on what size that building is and what the need of the area is. Jay Adams, who's one of my other colleagues, had some really good testimony earlier this week.
Yeah.
We're doing GIS mapping.
Yep.
That he has experience with, and I think that's also something that would be a good step along with the consideration of
Yep.
an option like that one.
Okay. Well, if you have time to look at that testimony, and let me know what you think, I'd appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. Was it yesterday? Or was that our dates, or?
Was it yesterday?
I think it was 2 days ago.
It was 2 days ago? It was
Last
week? No, he
It
was
was this
here
week,
this
yeah.
week. Okay, Chris.
Just a real quick one. Is your district moving forward with school construction, bringing this from the committee to the full board to really look at what you're gonna do?
So the next step is our committee has about 5 of the recommendations of the model here. It's an early draft, so it's not complete. But they're going to take a recommendation for 5 to the full board, and then we will have to go through. Because currently we would have to go through, as you know, a bond process. Like I said, the last one did not go well in our community. So they are discussing the possibility of a lot of community engagement as part of that process to see would the community be supportive of the options that are on the table, and of those options, which one would be the most palatable?
Now, would you want to wait to see what we do here, or?
Well, considering that we are close to the excess spending threshold, and currently the bonding would be considered as part of that, I would say the answer is a resounding yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yesterday when we asked about that expense, they said, no, it wasn't included in any of their budgets because it was a one-time expense, and it's one time for 20 years or maybe 30 years. Yeah.
Well, I heard that comment, and one of the reasons we have the challenges we have in our district, we have $84 million in deferred maintenance. One of the reasons we have that is because it's not built into the budget. So
Right.
just as a homeowner, you should be building capital expenses into your budget for ongoing maintenance and repairs. So I am very concerned that that's not part of the calculation.
And we heard
Second.
from the bond bank that we've got 3 school projects in Chittenden County, but outside of Chittenden County, there's almost no bonded indebtedness, which means exactly as you said, they should be bonding to put on new roofs so they don't leak every 20 years. And these are 50-year-old schools, and they aren't putting on new roofs, and they aren't, because you can't get the vote. And so, yes, I have yet to hear about a school in Vermont whose roof isn't leaking. It seems to be. Since my husband was a roofer, I'm very aware of what it costs to put a roof on a large flat roof. So, we have a lot of issues and a lot of the deferred maintenance, a lot of that's just been building for years. We just cut off school. We had to pay down our bonded indebtedness. Over 20 years ago, we had built so many schools, but we haven't put in any major maintenance money or help since then. And
Well, you mentioned the Cross at Brook School and Representative Wood, who's our representative from Waterbury, was the board chair when that building was built in the mid-90s with it's close to the 50% state funding. And that was due to the merger of Duxbury and Waterbury at the time.
yes,
And that's been 30 years.
I have the impression, and I'm curious just to validate this, that when a budget fails, one of the first things you do is defer maintenance, and that's where we're seeing these bottlenecks, just because you've had budget fails and the other pressures. Is that relatively consistent with your experience?
Yes, prior to my tenure, there was an annual surplus in the budget of about anywhere from 500,000 to a little over $1 million. And we would put out to the voters to move that into capital maintenance. Our capital maintenance has about $2 million for a large number of projects, including an issue today with our heating system at Harwood that has me worried in the moment.
Just to add to that thought that the 15 years of no school construction aid, I think, has led to a lot more deferred maintenance. So there's a followed up need that all our schools are 50 years old.
yes. It's like all of them just got replaced after the 27 flood and they all went bad at the same time. We had several years of that back in the 90s. So, yeah, we've contributed to some of this, but the reason you can't bond is for many, if not most school districts,
Get the budget passed.
the property taxes have been high enough so that people didn't feel they could swing that.
It comes down to programming versus.
Yeah, it'll come out of program, yeah. For the kids, so
Yeah.
the schools have been between a rock and a hard place. I can't remember being flush in a long time around here with funding, maybe for a few years during COVID, but we knew that was going away, so we couldn't spend it.
Your Weinberger's got that Let's Build Homes. I think we need Let's Build Schools.
There we go.
We are going to have to, if we are going to accomplish anything like this proposal, even cut it in half, we are going to have to build schools and we're going to have to build a bunch of them fairly quickly. And or we're going to have a much longer time frame, which doesn't help people realize immediate savings, which kind of cuts their enthusiasm for longer time frames.
Which means with the proposal that we are cutting staffing as
Yeah.
opposed to building capacity and scale.
Yeah, and I'm sure that your parents are not happy. When your kids, yeah.
You mind if I, thank you, Chair Cummings. Yeah, I just found out that one of the school districts in my Senate district is decided to close an elementary school. And of course, there's a lot of fervor on Facebook. People are not happy. I haven't chimed in, but I kind of want to chime in that, these are the hard decisions that districts are making now. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're being proactive and, instead of having the state do it, they're doing it on their own, which is, to me, should be applauded. But where I'm going with this is just that, and Libby, have you already talked? Did I miss you? Okay. We're getting a plan or plans and being rolled out at various stages, time frames. We're also kind of brainstorming ideas and, the various committees are doing their job. And I'm wondering, you are the folks who are on the ground, you're doing the work, you have the numbers, the expertise, the history, the experience, all of it. Are you also kind of thinking about a plan? Because we all agree there needs to be change. And if you are thinking about that, how will it get to us? Like, what is I'm trying to think of like the system of like, will it go through the VSA and then the VSA will come, or like, just curious.
Yeah,
What your thoughts are.
what could be done here? I think we all know one obvious thing that could be done here.
I look to our executive director, and if you want to, are you ready for me to change places?
No, I've got Libby next, but, just, you all are talking, you all are learning as we are learning what the bill dropped sometime today. So none of us, we've seen charts and notes, none of us have seen written language, which does have to lay things out a little more clearly than just the chart that says this is what this cost is, this is what this cost will be. These are all the things you can add with the savings. I haven't seen any subtracts. I think we figured out paras aren't in there, but some schools are depending on them. We've been given the geographic kind of outlines and what happens when a line goes through a town, but we haven't been given any information on how all those small schools are. Well, no one's saying they're going to get closed. They're going to get so much money, and I gather then they can't survive on that money. They will have to do something. And leaving it there, but there is no transition out there yet. We had a meeting with the secretary and all the leadership this morning and made it clear that we do, people need to know how you're going to get from here to there. That asking you to crunch numbers that are based on some, at this point, mythical school, district that may never exist is just causing all kinds of angst. And I've yet to see a chart that lays out where the savings are coming from.
Right.
Or never mind the money to reinvest in better teachers, better training, more support. And we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, it goes to the question that I raised yesterday about where's the savings, because all I see are ads.
Yeah.
And there may be savings, but one of the ways to get at it is to go back to the folks in the administration and ask them to give us 3 model districts, 3 districts that are real right now, and show us what it would look like in reality in order to get to that number based on that particular district and what you're going to do overall in the other kinds of cuts. It brings a reality that doesn't exist in the charts and so on that we've seen.
Yes, and we will ask them back in.
Well, I mean, that's what these superintendents are doing. They're applying the model to their own districts. and saying,
Well, I want the
"This is
people
what-"
who made the model to apply it
It's
to
not-
those districts
Yeah.
so that we can see the theory being executed in reality.
But that's what these guys are
I
doing.
know, but I want them to do it.
Yeah.
Since they're the ones who are the proposers. Because
Well, I
that
see.
forces a discipline in the process that may not exist right now.
I mean, that will force you to sit down and say, okay, it's not going to work in any one of these districts, but our proposal would combine this district with that district, and then that's where but
And you see,
these are
if
just
we
lines,
ask
right?
the superintendents to create a competing model, then all you're gonna have is an argument.
Well, and
You're
I
not gonna
agree
have, you're not gonna
with
have
that.
any,
Yeah.
any reconciliation, which is what I'm looking for with the administration.
Yeah.
proposal.
But thank you, and I meant to caveat my comments that it's not your job to do
No,
this,
let's
sorry.
let me talk, and then there's at least 2 people in this room who have much better access to the administration than I do. maybe we could get that word to them. That we need to start seeing something based in real schools.
I think a lot of it's in those spreadsheets that you saw yesterday in the dig info.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know that they're gonna be able to do, I mean, the superintendents know their schools better than the administration does. So I think like what we're seeing from them is showing us what this would impact their schools. And to Senator Beck's point, you know, their model is based on the new districts, which
Right,
are
but
not
sit
based.
down
you know,
and say, this is the new district. These are the schools that are gonna be in it. This is what their present budget is. This,
That's what was in the spreadsheets from yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah,
I mean, applying this model to any existing school district in the state of Vermont is like,
no,
there's
to
no point in even doing it.
to your new proposal.
Yeah.
This is, when we put all these schools together, this is where we will save
Yeah.
money, but do it in a reality base.
But that's it, the reality base of however you configure the district, whether you take a selected group, small selected group of schools within that district, like 3, and model it out based on the real data in those schools. What happens in those schools? There are other things you're gonna do in theory that will match the spreadsheet model that you created. You know what you're gonna do overall as far as the district leadership in the new districts, and you know what the leadership, if any changes that will be made at the central level of Department of Education. You ought to be able to model that with specific data.
You are setting me up. You would not believe. You're like, me a softball. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I apologize
Oliver
for my
lives on.
attire this morning. I was tagged in very late to this conversation, but sitting down and seeing Mardi Gras beads, it makes me feel like I'm okay.
Those are actually, UVM green. and
Ah,
gold
okay.
beads.
Those are special Mardi Gras beads.
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, yesterday I said that house that and there was fun dip the first thing I saw. So I'm starting to wonder what you all do when
But
somebody's
in a
at the
couple
door.
more
just
weeks,
to
there'll be
get me
Mardi
off.
Gras beads.
Anyway, thank you for having me. My name is Libby Bonesteel. I'm the superintendent over in Montpelier Roxbury Public Schools, and I will tell you, I've been like eager over there. I can speak to each of the conversations so far. The reason why I'm dressed this way is because there's a winter carnival over at Main Street Middle School today that I was looking at some snow sculptures, and while we were there, we had a maple syrup mishap that had some burning, and the fire trucks ended up coming over. And as I watched my head custodian come out and plow through 2 feet of snow with a fireman inside the building to open a window, because it requires 2 large grown men from the outside and the inside to open a window at my middle school. That just got me thinking about what Mike was saying, like, we need new windows. And if you've ever gone past Main Street Middle School or Union Elementary School, they are windows like this.
Yes,
So
and,
they
and in an emergency, we will throw a chair.
Yeah, exactly.
We've been asked to please open the inside ones first.
Yeah, and then since Mike and I we would be colleagues in our Winooski Valley mega district. You can add, what did you say, 6 million, Mike? You
Yes.
can add 3.3 million on top of that from Montpelier to Roxbury, because that's the shortfall from our district, from the foundation funding formula as proposed right now with the rates,
So we know where the savings are.
based on the information we have. I will also say that my 3 school buildings here in Montpelier are not school buildings that would go anywhere. And they are full.
Could you put that 3 million in context to your total budget? Is what percent is that?
So my total budget next year is about 32 million, a little bit over 32 million.
And your 6 million?
It would represent a 16% reduction to our budget.
Thank you.
And he's consistent. I have his notes from last Monday.
So our 3 buildings, going on what you were talking about, my 3 buildings would still be in service to students and families in the new, whatever configuration. If we were merged with Just Wash Central, you would still need my 3 buildings, and they are full of students. Montpelier High School may have a little bit of room, but that is my only building that has a little bit of room. So our enrollment is set to stay steady for the next 10 years. So there is not going to be less buildings in Montpelier Roxbury at this point. I've already closed my school that I can close.
Some of your schools are more than 50 years old.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. We're
My son, I think, was the last class at the Upper State Street
Yeah,
school.
Yeah. So I understand that in my buildings, there are reductions I can make, most definitely. There are reductions, so I don't want to come across as saying that we don't have reductions to make. We don't. We do. However, with the Picus and Odin model that is in the governor's plan, we would have to reduce 123 positions in our school buildings alone in order to reach their staffing model. So Chelsea asked me here today to talk to you about how I've done a side-by-side from just their school. I haven't touched central office yet. So just the school buildings, these are the numbers they have in their model. This is what for Union Elementary School, for instance, is a 400 student school, and Picus is based on a 450 student elementary school. So it's 89% of Picus, right? We can consider that to be 89% of Picus. And where do my school buildings stand based on that staffing, which I think is getting exactly at what you're talking about with your questions. I'm just a little bit of context. I have one vacancy in my entire district with any of my staffing. One vacancy, one special education vacancy at the high school. That's it. I have a full custodial staff, full food service staff. Everybody else is filled. Oh, thank you. My class sizes, we have a pretty robust class size policy in Montpelier Roxbury with a minimum and maximum, and my class sizes fall within that. Over the past few years, we have reduced elementary teachers in order to reach the class sizes. So we are within class size, we are above class size minimums in nearly every class with the exception of our higher level classes in the high school. So we are where we're supposed to be. We've done the hard work to get there. And I think that's just a really good background for you all to understand. So I don't have this for you, but I can get it to you. Just again, pinch hitting late. So Picus again is based on 450 students. I'm going to walk you through Union Elementary School, what this would mean for Union Elementary School. I have the information for all three buildings. So Picus says with 450 students, that's 26 for classroom teachers. 89% of that is 23 for classroom teachers. Union is actually at 21 classroom teachers. So we are below that. And with specials teachers, Picus is 450 students, is 5.2 specials teachers. 89% of that is 4.6. We're at 4 specials teachers at Union. Instructional coaches, they have 2.25 in Picus. 89% of that is 2. We have 1 instructional coach at Union Elementary School. Interventionists is the other place that is the major concern with the staffing models, because MTSS is not a nice to have, it's a requirement. And it's a requirement in this day and age with students that we have. In the Picus model, there's 1 interventionist included. And 89% of that is 0.89, right? We have 7.5 interventionists at Union Elementary School, and we have an excellent school. Our scores on the VCAP test are way above the student average, and it's because we have a very robust multi-tiered system of support with 7.5 interventionists doing a lot of that work. All of those are funded locally. We have 2 literacy interventionists, 2 math interventionists, 2 interventionists for social emotional learning, and I did include our multilingual teachers in there too. We have 1.5 multilingual teachers at Union Elementary School. When I asked Justin at APA, let's get the wrong, around this intervention number, he said, don't worry, you'll get federal funding through Title 1A. Montpelier Roxbury does not get Title I funding, and we do not pay for interventionists with Title I funding. We do get a little bit of it, but we don't pay our 7.5 interventionists through Title I funding. Those are funded through local funds. For counselors in social work, Picus has 2, and that's 1.78 if you take 89% of it. We have 4 at Union Elementary School. We've spoken at length, superintendents in general, about the need for mental health services in the state of Vermont. We don't get to close our doors and say you can't come. So we have 4 counselors and social workers in our building. We have 1 nurse, which roughly matches what Picus says. In terms of instructional assistants, just what you were talking about, they have 2 for 450 students, which I don't know what school in the country has that. We have 24 instructional assistants at Union Elementary School. And let me just break that down for you, because I know there's a lot of talk of Vermont over hiring instructional assistants, and I don't disagree with that. I think we do that.
However, in my bargaining agreement, our teachers at Union Elementary School are not allowed to do recess and lunch duty. And so if they can't do recess and lunch duty, somebody has to. And so we have instructional assistants who have to do that. And believe me, I have tried to bargain that out for the last 6 years of my superintendency, and that is not something that MREA is gonna let us do. So we need at least six to ensure safety to cover lunch and recess for instructional assistants. We have 15 instructional assistants who are tied to IEPs, individualized educational programs, which of course are legally binding and are decisions made with parents involved. Out of that 15, 3 of them are behavior technicians. 12 of them are intensive needs. That's an assistant for somebody who has significant life needs, that literally they need an adult by their side to be safe and be able to survive at school during the day. And then the 6 of them are classroom assistants. So that's our instructional assistants are broken down. We are not top heavy. We do not have classroom assistants in every classroom doing photocopying. That's an old model that does not exist in our district. So just breaking that 24 down is significant to understand what that's the makeup of, that what we have there. Library media, we have 1, so does PICUS. Substitutes, PICUS said 1.72. That's lockable. We need about 5 a day. We don't usually have that. So a lot of our instructional assistants actually do a classroom teacher, as do our principals on a daily basis, because we don't have enough substitutes to come into our classroom, especially since COVID. We have 1 principal, same with PICUS, 1 assistant principal, same with PICUS. We have 2 admin assistants, same with PICUS. What PICUS also doesn't have are custodian, food service, and special educators in their model. I'm not quite positive how special education works out. I was really interested in Karen Conroy's numbers that Chelsea reported on earlier from St. Johnsbury. We haven't done that math. But at Union Elementary School, we have 9 special educators. 1 is funded through IDEA and 8 are funded locally. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of the grant that the state is proposing right now. We have 3 custodians. That is nowhere in the staffing models, including the central office. I'm not sure where that's considered, but you need somebody to clean the schools. And we have 3 of them for that very large old building. And then food service to feed our 400 students. We have 5 food service workers, and that is nowhere in the modeling as well. So what that equates to, based on the differences, Union Elementary School is 40.92 people, if you can put a person in a 0.92, above what the staffing model that's been presented to us from the state, from the PICUS report and from that they're using in their modeling. That's significant. Just to give you a little piece from our other schools, Main Street Middle School is, is 31.24 people over, and Montpelier High School is 37.19 people over. So the class sizes in reality, when you're looking at actual school buildings, that yes, I could reduce some. Absolutely, 100%. We could reduce some. We could also work close. We could share some. Speech and language pathologists, we could share people. Multilingual teachers, we already do share them. We could definitely do that. We cannot share 127 people. So that would be a significant reduction in class or in staffing. It would essentially have us have 4 teachers and 4 teachers alone, and that's it. And there's a lot of other services that are provided to kids these days than just our core classroom instruction.
I'm starting to wonder, and we're going to have Florida PICUS in our joint meeting next week. If his numbers were done before COVID and this rise in mental health, I think Vermont's alone in that. And then the other thing I'm wondering is, do other states do the same amount of mainstreaming and have non-exclusionary discipline requirements?
I think it depends by state.
I think it depends by state, but it definitely adds to your cost if you can't send a violent student away.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely adds to your cost if you are dealing with the mental health in your schools, or do you, I believe in Texas a couple of years ago, there were stories about a young woman who happened to be a young woman of color who said something inappropriate and got sent to reform school for a year. Other states, and I'm wondering if the, national models, if they're that far under us, because I think we've got some schools that probably throw paraeducators at kids, but I think there's other states that just wouldn't let their kids into the kids with the, with such needs that they require a person with them. They probably wouldn't have them in the middle schools. I do remember when there was the Green Mountain School in Montpelier. And we closed the Week School.
That was remarkable testimony, and I would love to see that for every school in the state and overlay this model. I really have two questions. One, I don't know if anybody here will be able to answer it, but it's really for the administration. And I'm wondering if this 13,200 was just assuming that there would be an additional amount raised at the local level. But that's a broader question for another.
I actually can tell
Yeah.
you, well, Morgan Debo is up here right now. Hi, Morgan. Morgan and I are on the timeline sprint team, and he asked where the savings came from with the 13.2
Yes.
and asked if they had done the math of like, this is the amount of central office folks we would save by combining central offices. This is a amount. Or did you take 13.2 and multiply it by the number of students and then subtract it by what we spend currently? And the answer was the latter.
Yeah, I think
They've
we're starting
testified
to
to that.
Yes.
So there is no mathematics other than what my second graders can do behind the savings that is coming out.
More nuance is definitely needed
Right.
in all of this.
Right.
The other question I think that you probably could answer, and I'm married to a public school teacher, Really, she teaches in 5th grade. She watches lunch, so she does go out
Yeah.
and monitor kids.
Most teachers do.
Does this legislature have a role in we can't step into contracts with teachers unions, can we?
So there was really interesting testimony today that I would put you to in House Ed. He had Jeff Bannon, and do you know who testified with Jeff today?
I think
Rebecca Bloom, around that idea right there.
Okay.
Who are much more articulate and knowledgeable around that topic, because that is a big question that House Education is trying to address right now.
How many less interventionists might you think you could go with if you could have your teachers help cover recess and lunch?
IAs, you mean, it's
Yeah,
not
IAs.
interventionist, 6. We could reduce by 6,
Thank you.
because the others are attached to an IEP.
Thank you.
So anyway, I have moved our next witnesses back to 3:15 because I want to give Morgan Daybell a chance to talk.
Which you should.
And I think we are seeing the holes in the present proposal, that it works on paper, but it probably doesn't work in reality. But bottom line is we need to get back to, we need to find a solution. So if this isn't a solution, what is a solution? What could we do to, in something less than 2 decades, get a control? We are going, I think, to have foundation formula. I think we will have spending over it with some equalizing factor. We are going to have to get the cost of health insurance under control, or it's health care. Insurance just reflects that cost. But even at that, I think we are going to have to find a way to do some consolidation. Come on, these are big schools. I have a high school, 15 miles down the road with 24 kids in it. That's not a big school. We've got a couple of smaller high schools, and what is the optimum size? And then how do we get there? And how do we transport? I mean, we're having trouble transporting people 10 miles down a paved road. But heard stories from parents about co-ed sleepovers and you go, what? And they say, yeah, well, you try picking up your kids at a party at midnight in January, and it's a 20-mile drive from one side of the school district to the other. That's 40 miles in the snow in January. And so there are social kinds of limitations if you get as big as some of our districts are now, and that's not the biggest district in this state. So maybe it's, yeah, where do we do some consolidating? So I'm gonna get to Morgan Daybell. Maybe we'll get a 5-minute break before we go back to caregiver tax credits.
That made more sense.
Okay, Morgan,
Okay.
just introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Morgan Daybell, and I'm the past president of FASBO, and I'm the current CFO of Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union. Thank you for the opportunity. I have submitted written testimony, and nothing in there contradicts or adds that much from what you've heard so far from these 3 superintendents in Chelsea. Given that and given your time constraints, I'll just touch on a few points briefly and then happy to try to answer any questions. In terms of governance, FASBO acknowledges the potential benefits of district consolidation and supports exploring those options. The decisions need to be data-driven, and the justification for consolidating down to 5 districts remains unclear to us. Additionally, we support reconfiguring supervisory unions into supervisory districts, as supervisory unions are inefficient and impose unnecessary administrative burdens and costs on the system. I think this is now pretty widely acknowledged, but the proposed timeline for consolidation is unrealistic. We presented to the House Education Committee, I think on Wednesday, around some of the key considerations of that and our concerns around the timeline and standing up brand new entities.
Could you elaborate on those timeline concerns and what timeline you're referring to?
Sure. So it would be the timeline in terms of standing up those 5 new districts and transferring all the staff and all the students over into those. In Franklin Northeast through Act 46, we took our 5 existing districts and merged them into 2, and then we received another district or another town from a neighboring SU and incorporated them. And just that relatively minor merger took a lot of work and a lot of time, and it was pretty ungainly process. So I'm trying to imagine doing that now from Richford down to Shoreham in one of those districts, and it would really require a pretty long and thoughtful runway in terms of standing up boards and developing policies and hiring central office staff and negotiating collective bargaining agreements before you start pulling people in.
That little thing, contracts.
Yep, keeps coming back to that.
Wow. That's big part of your expense and something you can't just change because you want to. Everybody's got to agree to go along with this or can get tied up for a long time. Okay.
So we're also open to exploring alternative funding models, including that foundation formula, as long as they're ensuring equitable and adequate resources for all students. We have a concern around implementing a new funding mechanism without changing the delivery model and changing the underlying cost of education, such as health insurance, mental health, infrastructure needs, all the things that you've been grappling with over the last decade. In terms of the governor's plan, we're also looking for more transparency in terms of the calculations used and the data used to come up with that 13.2 figure. The amount from the formula feels insufficient. The superintendents have really put some local spin on that and what it would look like in their districts. Statewide, it looks like it would result in a cut of about 152 million. In what I've seen most recently, this is approximately 1,500 people, positions across the education system. And this would be far more than riffing every central office in all 52 superintendencies. So those cuts are really going to go well beyond central office and down to the school level. And I think Libby and the other superintendents have really pointed to that. Briefly touch on career technical education. The proposal is suggesting pulling those CTEs out and putting them into a separate BOCES. We're not understanding how that would really get us to what I think is the long-term goal of having comprehensive high schools that include career and technical opportunities for all students, so all those students can move back and forth. Obviously, that dovetails with facilities infrastructure needs, and similar to what Mike presented earlier. When I look at the model, my current district of 2,000 kids should be educated in 4 buildings. Currently, I operate 8. But in order to do that, I would need 2 new buildings to hold 450 kids in each. And so getting to that scale that's assumed by the funding model is going to take some pretty significant changes into the capital infrastructure picture in the state.
Okay.
The last 2 things I'll leave you with is, remember our experiences with Act 127 and Act 84 in the last session. And whatever we do, we want it to be done thoughtfully with adequate time for financial modeling with all of the partners in the field. And I have not seen the bill that you've apparently seen and is going to be released on Tuesday. But once we get their hands on that, VASBO would love to come back and talk specifically about the proposals there.
Okay. Questions? Thank you, and I hope you all will get your written testimony and Libby, your comparison. We can get those to a bunch of schools. It would be helpful.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Morgan, you may have said this and I missed it, but did you see the spreadsheets that we looked at yesterday? Have you seen those spreadsheets at all?
I don't think we can.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
If you
Charlotte sent it.
What, the spreadsheets from yesterday?
Yeah.
They don't format on our website,
I sent them to my
so
supervisor.
you send them.
I sent them to mine. Did you get them?
I just
Not sent them
interested,
to mine.
I would love ASBO to see what they do. Okay.
Yeah.
I could forward that email to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look at that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, just to get your impressions on the line items and what's included, what's not included. Gosh.
The budgets. So we get down, it's Libby that really helps with. This is what it would cost, and I'm at Picus's. And if I can get that, because we're gonna talk to Larry on Tuesday, so at some point you can email it to me, because I think Randy's right, that's what we're going to need to do. And then you can see which schools, what it'll mean to the schools that are at as close as you get at without doing away with the half a teacher or a quarter of a teacher. How many schools we've got out there and how many schools can we afford to build? And where do we want to build them? And again, what kind of commitment, and I heard it today, commitment. If we go to a foundation formula, our history is we haven't always funded it. So what's the guarantee? There's no guarantee, which works for us, but may not work for them, on bonding. There's, I haven't said that we will guarantee to pay them X amount every year, just whatever we think we can afford. But we need to have a much better look at any plan, and we need to know where the roads go. We need to know, and I'm assuming that the ed committees are doing that. But we're gonna have to talk about how you're gonna. It's not worth doing this and going through all the pain if we aren't gonna save a significant amount of money or produce a significantly better education for kids. And so far in theory, we will.
That point you just said, one thing I said last night to Champlain Valley educators, there's a formula, foundation formula that's more traditional to what the other 48 states do that fund at our current levels that I still see value in, because I think it will address some of the inequities. What was it? Local appetite, that I think that that's still merit in going forward in both the foundation formula and governance changes. Even if it doesn't drastically change the quality or the costs, I see merit in those. That's my.
I think we will, but I think we're also, we all remember last year, should hit the wall is.
So you're looking at him.
Major, we've got to get it back to the 2 to 4% a year that it once was. We'll see. I'm gonna give you a 10-minute break. This is a lesson in how legislation run. I put Rebecca off till 3:15, so take, what is that, 6 minutes?